A. The Book Thief by Markus Zusak was originally published in 2005. It was very successful, with some readers calling it a modern classic, as it went on to sell over 15 million copies worldwide. The novel is historical fiction and is set in Germany between 1939 and 1943. It's centered on the town of Molking, near Munich, and explores how members of the community react to the Nazi Party, the treatment of the Jewish population, and the everyday struggles and difficulties of life in the Second World War. The protagonist is a young girl named Liesel Meminger, who's cared for by her foster parents on Himmel Street. Beyond the members of this small household, a number of other characters are also fleshed out over the course of the book, including Liesel's friends and neighbors, and a young man named Max, who must take great care to avoid the authorities. Liesel is the titular thief, and over time she steals a collection of books that provide her with comfort and equip her with a means of making sense of the upheaval around her. Some of the books are gifted to her as well, including a few that are homemade, and they appear through integrated illustrations within the text itself. Liesel's story is recounted by Death, who functions as a fully omniscient narrator. He knows how each character's fate will unfold, and he taunts the reader with references to forthcoming events before detailing them later on. Because Death is far from human, he has a unique way of speaking, often pulling away from the story to provide asides that can be snide, humorous, or reflective. His perspective helps bring a distinctive element to what might otherwise be a fairly conventional wartime narrative. Naturally, a novel set in World War II is going to contain its share of heartbreak and loss, and the story does indeed deliver some emotional moments. The prose has a tendency to get a little ungainly at times, but the book moves beyond the familiar themes of love, grief, and endurance to make a compelling statement about language. Words can certainly be manipulated towards ugly and destructive ends, but the Book Thief reminds us that words can also be stolen back and repurposed to achieve good, that they can be used through storytelling itself to build beauty. The first time I read this novel, it was from this Knopf trade paperback edition. It features a sepia-toned photograph of a finger reaching out to tip a row of dominoes. This recalls a chapter in the second half of the novel called Dominoes in Darkness, where Rudy Steiner sets up an elaborate arrangement so he can knock them down by candlelight with his sisters. Inside, the 10 parts of the book, plus the prologue and epilogue, are divided with these title pages. The text is all in lowercase font, including the synoptic chapter headings. The book includes internal illustrations by Trudy White. These ones are integrated. These ones are full page. Some more integrated illustrations, and some other little artistic flourishes. There's an impressive collection of bonus material at the end. This includes an introduction from Markus Zusak, plus some of his process notes, early drafts, and commentary. There's also an interview with the author. There are over 25 pages of extras here, and I was quite satisfied with this edition of the book. But when the Folio Society announced that it would be releasing a version of the novel, I was eager to see what else their illustrated hardcover copy might have in store, especially given the visual nature of this particular title. So, let's do this. Here we have The Book Thief from the Folio Society. This edition was released in 2024. It's presented in a textured slipcase with a design that recalls the basement wall of 33 Himmel Street, where German words are painted as they're learned and mastered, and then covered up so new sets can be layered on top. There's a splatter of fresh white paint at the bottom, and this heavy streak wraps around to the other side. It makes up the long cloud of Max's painting. Here are 2 orange figures walking with arms out for balance along a tightrope of cloud, moving towards the yellow hole of the sun. The unfinished quality, with the translucent coverage and the drips, is deliberate. On the cover of the book, there's an image of a little girl's face peeking out from between books on a shelf. The books are done in a bunch of different styles, with hubbed and printed spines. These volumes continue on to the reverse, and are all in a green color, which contrasts with the radiant reddish tones for the face on the front. On the spine, we see the title blocked in a silver font, and it's almost aligned with the illustrated book itself. Below that, there's a 3-line flourish, and then the author name, with the publisher logo at the bottom. The binding is finished with green bands that match the color of the books on the board illustrations. When we open the novel, we're met by plain end papers in that same green color from the cover. The book itself is printed on Abbey wove paper, Folio's standard stock for the text block, which is smooth, acid-free, and comes in a warm white color. If we bring back the Knopf edition for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the Folio Society version is much bigger, with an extra 5 centimeters in the height and 4 centimeters in the width. The font size is larger in the Folio version. This, along with the better degree of contrast from the higher quality print and paper, makes the readability of the Folio edition a clear improvement. The text is slightly different in that the Knopf version has been Americanized with terms like soccer, while football and other British expressions and spellings are used in the Folio version. The individual chapter names are indicated along the top. Each of the novel's 10 parts has this nice big bold display with a title in all caps and no capitalization for the synoptic chapter list. One of the most surprising features of this book is that Death's asides, his little death notes, are printed in blue text throughout. I didn't catch that this book would be printed in 2-color in any of the promotional material for Folio's Book Thief, and it's a lovely little secret feature of this particular release. The author's note from Markus Zusak serves as an introduction. He begins by looking back at his time writing the book 20 years ago, then he addresses this newest edition from the Folio Society. The author's note was written in 2024, and it's followed by the same acknowledgments that were at the end of the Knopf edition. The interior artwork, like the cover, is by Alexis Deakin. He's an author and illustrator who has also worked in animation. The artwork here is made up of 2-page spreads, and the color pieces are presented on thicker satin paper, with the images all landing within 5 pages of the text they correspond to. Let's take a detailed look at that artwork now. The first illustration is the title page. It features a black and white image of Liesl Meminger sitting atop a pile of rubble, clutching a book. She's just experienced a tremendous loss. We will learn more about this towards the end of her story, but from what we encounter of this scene in the prologue, we know that her basement, where she learned to read with Hans Huberman in her home at 33 Himmel Street, is part of the rubble mound that she sits atop. A suitcase, a mattress, and a door are all visible in the rubble, along with many other household items. In the background, the sagging power lines and the watercolor sky contribute to the sense of broken defeat, which is so painfully evident in the posture of the figure. The second illustration depicts a scene that occurs at night on Hitler's birthday in 1940. The people of Molking have collected anything that can burn, including books, and they look to celebrate the occasion with a massive burning in the town square. We can see the edges of the Nazi flags and the residents who watch from the streets or rooftops. Liesl manages to rescue a survivor from the burning, a blue book with red letters, and she clutches the treasure to her chest. There is a power and defiance in her depiction here as Liesl holds the glowing book. She is solid and concrete, drawn with thick lines and heavy shadows. She's the girl made of darkness, and this is contrasted against the loose lines used for the crowd and the slightly lopsided and fragile-looking buildings behind her. The third image is of the mayor's wife, Ilsa Hermann, who admits Liesl into her home and reveals the fantastic library full of cold air and books. The seemingly mute and broken woman in her bathrobe watches the pure wonder and joy on her young visitor's face. The immaculate shelving holds books of all shapes and sizes. The artist has employed color so well here to convey the sheer variety of books that amaze and delight Liesl. In this fantastic room, the window is always open, letting fresh air and light spill in. The details in this piece, from the desk to the slightly out of focus books in the extreme foreground, are wonderful. If this was my library, a lot of these would be folios. The fourth image is the basement of 33 Himmel Street. Each page of Mein Kampf has been removed and painted over in white. They've been hung up to dry. We can see the lantern and the open can, among other painting supplies like drop cloths and brushes. This may be Max's hiding place. The words on the wall recall the slipcase design, and the muted color scheme fits here, as the basement is a drab, colorless room where Liesel's stories of sunlight and weather reports are welcome touches of color. The next illustration is of a sick Max Vandenberg as Liesel checks in on him. Max fell ill shortly after Christmas. His condition continues to deteriorate throughout the early months of 1942, and the family moves him up to Liesel's room. She checks on him frequently as he fights the illness for weeks. She reads to him, and we can see an indication of a book at the bottom of the image. The contrast in styles works well here, as Max's arm and the bed are loose and impressionistic, with tighter details for his stubbly sleeping face. Liesel herself is rendered in full as she reaches out and feeds him a tear from her own cheek. The lighting effect gives this scene a little touch of hope and magic in all the somber blue-green that dominates the depiction of the curtained bedroom. The sixth image is of Hans Huberman. As Molking prepares for air raids, Hans experiences a surprising spike in business, as the residents all want him to paint their blinds black to help keep in the light at night. He has to get innovative in terms of mixing up black paint, and he takes Liesel on the job with him whenever he can. At lunch breaks, Hans would play the accordion. We can see him here, surrounded by the tools of his trade and splashed in black paint, as he smokes a cigarette and makes music. The artist has done a great job of capturing the look of unequaled casual concentration on Hans's face, from these moments which Liesel later recalls as the best time of her life. This is also my favorite of the bunch. I love the texture of the accordion, the position of the figure, and the highlights and shadows across his clothing. The seventh and final image is from a scene near the end of the novel after an air raid, when an enemy plane crashes near the Amper River. Rudy Steiner, with toolbox in hand, carefully climbs to the pilot and places a teddy bear near the dying man. Rudy's better at leaving things behind than stealing them. Liesel watches Rudy, and above her, death is also present, represented as an inky shadow. The degree of detail for the interior of the cockpit is impressive. The smashed body of the plane, with its nose in the water and the bits of wreckage strewn about in the greens of the forest and the water, reveal a great attention to detail on the part of artist Alexis Deakin. I'm quite pleased with the Folio Society edition of The Book Thief. But wait! I've got an upgrade to my upgrade. I don't normally mess with limited editions. The standard edition folio is more than enough luxury for me. However, I did go for it in this case, due to the low limitation number and because of what was offered at the price point. This limited edition copy cost between 3 and 4 times the price of the standard edition. But what exactly are you paying that premium for? First up is this wonderful slipcase. It has a silkier texture compared to the standard release, which is rougher, like the concrete that it attempts to simulate. This one features an image from the beginning of the novel, with young Liesel crouching in the snow, reaching for a copy of the Gravedigger's Handbook, the first book she steals. Death appears here much like he does in the previous illustration of the crashed airplane, as a spectral shade. He reaches out branch-like as the cast shadows from the tree above, which is also home to a robin. I really love the pale blues of this striking image, and I feel that it would have been right at home within the book itself. The book is leather-bound, with elegant silver lettering on the front and the spine. It looks a lot like the illustration of the book on the slipcase, which is a little meta. The leather is soft and it smells great, like a pair of new shoes. There is silver foil applied to the top edge of the book, which wasn't present in the standard edition. Here, the head and tail bands are gray. Inside, there are plain black end papers and a black ribbon bookmark. The text block is exactly the same as the standard edition, down to the Abbey wove paper, the blue printing, with the same pagiation and the same illustrations. It looks like both versions were developed simultaneously, which is something they seem to be doing quite regularly these days. The only other internal difference is this tipped-in limitations page, which is signed by author Markus Zusak and illustrator Alexis Deakin. The slipcase artwork is mirrored on the inside of the box, but it has a smooth, waxy feel, likely to help protect the cover leather from rub. The limited edition sits a little further back in its slightly larger slipcase than the standard edition, so they're not a perfect match, but I am happy to have both. The exclusive artwork for the limited edition slipcase is stunning, and I appreciate the leather binding, the ribbon bookmark, and the autographs. But the standard edition is also a very strong release, with whimsical art for the cover and a unique in-world concept for the slipcase. Both versions feature the exclusive introduction from Markus Zusak and the 7 illustrations from Alexis Deakin, which cleverly parallel the colors of the books Liesl steals, from black to red to gray to blue to green. It's a design that reveals great care and attention to detail. When it comes to my old trade paperback copy, I think I can safely move it to the box of doom, because now I have 2 fancy editions to take its place on my bookshelf. As always, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for future videos. When it comes to the stories you love, it's always worth upgrading your books.